Coming up on our very first public safety podcast, we find out more about our Emergency Communications Center and how police and fire rescue work with them on various situations. Welcome to the inaugural City of Murfreesboro Public Safety Podcast, a podcast focusing on everything police, fire, and emergency communications related. I'm your host, Public Information Officer Larry Flowers. Today, we will be discussing how these public safety departments all work together. Joining me now is Emergency Communication Director Seth Russell.
Hey.
Shan Womack, she's an assistant fire marshal with the Murfreesboro Fire Rescue Department Community Risk and Reduction Division of the Fire Marshal's Office. And last but certainly not least, Sergeant Amy Denton. She's the community relations, coordinator for the Murfreesboro Police Department.
Hi, Larry.
Thank you
Hey,
to
Larry.
one of you for joining us
Thank
this
you.
morning. We all know that public safety is a team effort. Different first responders working together for one common goal, and that's the safety of our residents. At the center of it all is our Emergency Communications Center, or what's known the most as a dispatch center. First, let's jump right into it. What is the mission of these three different entities, and how do they work toward the safety of our residents? Seth, why don't we begin with you?
Absolutely. Murfreesboro Emergency Communications Center is dedicated to serving the community by answering emergency and non-emergency phone calls and answering call for services. They are the critical link to help the citizen for the call for help and the hub of emergency services. And we're responsible for coordinating all the police, fire, and medical responses within the city. With emphasis on teamwork, we aid the emergency service providers in protecting life and property, and also watch for their own safety too in the field.
Shan?
The mission statement for the fire department is to deliver the highest quality of service with a great regard for public safety. Members are dedicated to consistently providing progressive fire protection, special operations, advanced medical life support, community risk reduction, professional development opportunities, and strategic partnerships.
And Amy?
The Murfreesboro Police Department is committed to the protection of life and the prevention of crime and disorder. With an emphasis on community policing, we build partnerships and seek proactive approaches and innovative solutions to address crime and other safety issues in our community which adversely affect our daily lives. Through prompt, efficient, and courteous service, we strive towards our ultimate goal of creating a better quality of life for our citizens, our visitors, and ourselves.
Yeah, that's a lot of information. Good thing that we don't have to remember those by heart, but I really appreciate you guys explaining that, and it's still one common goal, the safety of our residents. We really appreciate that. Now, we often hear that telecommunicators, whether they're called call takers, dispatchers, or telecommunication specialists, they're often referred to as first responders, the first responders. Seth, what exactly does that mean?
We definitely look at them and see them as first responders with the city of Murfreesboro and all around the nation. So they're the ones serving behind the scene in the communication center, ready to take that call for help, and whether it's emergency or non-emergency, and whether they are not on the scene physically, virtually, or over the phone, that call for help, they're the first on the scene through that telephone call, assisting the citizen, whether it's for their safety, their own safety instructions, or figuring out what the emergency is, what resources are needed, and being there with the caller as the first responders are dispatched and arrive on scene. And even during, sometimes in the case, they stay on the phone call during that scene if needed. So they are seen as the first responders because they are the first public safety servant to support that citizen in need.
Mm-hmm. For sure, and that calm voice, so to speak, to try
Absolutely.
to keep the people on the other line as calm as possible, but gather as much information as possible.
Absolutely.
Sure. And Amy, why don't we turn to you? How important is it to get as much information as possible before a police officer ever arrives on the scene?
Right. It's imperative. Our officers need to know what they're walking into, what they're driving up to, whether it's weapons involved, if someone's intoxicated, if they're having a mental health crisis. It's helpful to know if we've been there before, if this is a a repeat situation at a home or even at a business, it's good for us to know, all the information, maybe who the people are, who the individuals are that are involved. Are they a convicted felon, and is their firearms there? All those things for officer safety. How to get there. If there's a road blocked by a crash that's not related to our situation, we need to reroute to get to the situation that we're going to.
Sure. And Shan, the fire department pretty much responds to everything police do. Police
sir.
respond to everything that the fire department does. So how important is it for firefighters as they're en route to the scene to get as much information as possible?
Oh, it plays a vital role. En route, all the questions that those dispatchers are asking the callers, they relay that to us, and we can paint a mental picture of that whole scene before our arrival. So we know what to prepare for as we get there. As far as if it's a fire scene, that captain can go ahead and assign assignments to those firefighters on the way. They're going to let them know about firefighter safety, if there's oxygen tanks possibly in the home or just any other type of fire hazards. They're going to know that before arrival. A lot of times they'll let them know because that caller may know all occupants are out of the home. There's possibly still occupants in the home, so that helps us prepare a little bit as well. They also let us know the closest hydrants, like if we're responding to a fire. So that's not even a thought that has to be added to the captain's role. Those dispatchers are letting them know where the closest hydrants are at. Just things like that. It plays a vital role.
Sure. And Seth, how do dispatchers and call takers get that particular information?
There's many resources, but two things I want to highlight is obviously, like you were saying, we were talking about before, and Shan and Amy talked about, is that caller. And even on complex incidents such as a structure fire or a multiple vehicle accident, we actually have multiple callers coming into that center. So you're talking multiple 911 dispatchers handling those callers individually and piecing that puzzle together with that. What did that scene look like? As we are dispatching and as first responders are getting en route. So with the Pacific on the caller, we have structured key questions that help us identify what the situation is and classify that incident or what the emergency resources are needed. So we are gathering that information from the caller or callers in a very structured, guided format. So the questions we're asking it's very intentional, and there's a reason why we're asking those questions to get some specific information that we need for the safety of the caller and also the safety of first responders, and to make sure we get the right resources out there, whether it's police, fire, or medical. And for all of that is we provide post-dispatch instructions and safety instructions to the caller for medical, CPR instructions, some other medical pre-arrival instructions. So not only the safety of the caller, but also the safety of the patient if it is a second party or third party caller. And we are dealing with some of the first party callers, second party callers, and third party callers, which means kind of their proximity to what that incident is. And we have to tailor that line of questioning and that information gathering based on how close they are to the incident, how involved they are or not involved. The other key resource we have is a handful of technology tools when it comes to location. We get certain location information through the 911 system, but we also have a third-party application that provides more GPS data from the cell phones. We also use maps and Greenway maps and other resources to help really narrow down that location, because that is ultimately the most important thing we need to get relayed to the first responders. There's also resources through other means that I think we'll talk about later on the show.
And sure, I think both Shan and Sergeant didn't kind of touched on it, but is there any other source of information that you get for a call for service besides the caller themselves?
Absolutely. Like we just talked about the caller and maybe some location technology tools with that. We work with alarm monitoring centers that send us digitally information based on those calls. We do input hazard information on certain addresses. So maybe a good example on the fire side is if there's a citizen that has oxygen at the house, that would be something that we could put in our system to give the fire response a head's notice on that. And that's if there's any questions about maybe a hazardous address, whether that example or maybe a person with special needs or medical information, limited medical information that you want your first responders to be aware of, you can reach out to the police department admin side of your officer or the firefighter department and look at submitting that information. That will eventually get to us, and we'll put that in our system.
Sure. And when dispatch is on the call with call takers, they just want to get help there as soon as possible. But are resources already heading to a location while that call taker is on the phone with dispatch?
Yes, absolutely. We are definitely more of a horizontal center, so we have multiple people working that incident. So like I said, if it's a motor vehicle accident, we probably have a few different callers, whether first party, second party, third party. So there's 2 or 3 different call takers potentially working that incident, that gathering the information from those callers on simultaneously and currently with that, we have the fire dispatcher that is dispatching those resources, and also the police dispatcher. And we have policies and procedures and guides. So when we get the minimum information needed for that dispatch, that is being dispatched as we are still gathering more information on the phone with those callers. So if you were to call 911 and we're still asking a few different questions, that's not delaying the response. The response is generally sent out within a minute and a half on most cases. So again, that's all based on once we get that minimum location information, some key officer safety or a basic understanding what's going on in the incident. We're sending those responders away or dispatching. We're also looking at call history on certain addresses. If it is a criminal matter, we're looking at prior criminal histories on potentially people involved. So we are gathering multiple information from multiple resources with multiple people working that incident.
So once on the scene, what type of communication role is there between police, Amy in your case, and dispatch, and of course Shan in your case, with firefighters or a fire captain with dispatch? We'll begin with you, Amy.
Like Seth mentioned, on a car crash, it's not uncommon, especially if there's injuries involved, you're going to get police and firefighters on scene. So once we get on scene, we need to let the dispatchers know, is the road blocked or is there still travel lanes available? If we need more officers for traffic control, if we get there and we see that there's a large fluid spill, we'll let dispatch know, to let the fire department know to bring some extra equipment to deal with that. If we get there and we see that the people in the cars, we can't get them out without the car being cut, we'll let them know to tell the fire department to bring that equipment also. And it could be, that we need tow trucks called. We need the street department to come and sweep up afterwards, or we need the street department or the sign department to come and put up new stop signs that get knocked down, or to call the electric company for a new utility pole, or the gas company because something got hit. So they are our link to all the help we need once we get there initially. And then as we're working the crash, our officers have mobile data terminals in their cars to run people's driver's license and run the vehicle tags. But sometimes it's chaotic on scene, or those pieces of electronics are not working correctly at the time. So we can have dispatch run the people's driver's license and the tag numbers, because our role on a crash is to investigate the crash. What happened, who's responsible, that kind of thing, and eventually to get the road opened back up. It's a totally separate, different role than the firefighters have when they get there, but I'll let Shan explain all that. But dispatch is the center of all of that action that's going on.
Sure. And Shan, what type of communication role does the fire department play with dispatch when you arrive on the scene?
Yes, after arrival on scene, just like Amy said, they're still a huge part of that. When we arrive on scene, sometimes we need additional resources. If it's a major fire, we may need more fire trucks there. We need more equipment there, and they play a huge role in that. They also conduct our PAR checks, which is a personnel accountability report. They conduct those every 10 minutes they communicate with our command on scene for that duration as that's needed. Sometimes we also need on scene, we need utilities, different utilities for electric cut and electricity, and we need Red Cross sometimes on our fire scene. So they do all that communication for us, and that just kind of helps our role majorly because they do all that for us. They sometimes too, I think it's very important that they're listening to the whole. If it's a major fire scene, they're not there. You know, it's very chaotic sometimes on a fire scene, and we all have different roles to do. Where dispatches, they're listening to every single communication that we have. So there may be something that they catch that we miss. Like a Mayday sometimes, you know, hopefully we would never miss that on the scene, but that dispatcher's listening for that. And if he or she hears that Mayday and we overlook that or just don't hear that because of something else we're doing, they're going to stop all radio traffic until that situation is taken care of. So it's very important that they just listen to the whole thing and maybe catch something that we don't on a fire scene.
You know, dispatchers, they want to account for every person that they sent to a scene. Mm-hmm. Just talk a little bit about that, you know, checking on the personnel that's on the scene. That's
yes,
important.
So the PAR checks, and that's what he's talking about that we mentioned. In a fire, if we make entry into a structure, dispatch automatically starts a PAR check, which is an accountability system. They will tell command, hey, it's been 10 minutes, so let's do another PAR check. At that time, command will reach out to everyone on the scene. Those captains in charge of that group, that crew, they will make sure everybody's there. Everybody's accounted for. We're not missing anybody. Nobody's somewhere they're not supposed to be. Everybody's accounted for. They will say, like, ladder one has PAR. So that means that everybody's accounted for. And then they will communicate that back to dispatch. PAR is good. So they'll start that timer over again. In another 10 minutes, the same thing. Once the fire gets out and the scene settles down a little bit, the command will cancel that PAR. So,
sure.
But yeah, it's very important.
Sure. Telecommunicators, they, of course, sound pretty important. Is there any type of special recognition that our telecommunicators, get each year? Is there something like that going on to recognize these hardworking men and women?
The great timing of this podcast. Actually, next week is a National Public Safety Telecommunicator Week, and that's nationwide, where jurisdictions recognize those that serve in the Emergency Communications Center, 911 centers around the nation. So the department and the city does an excellent job trying to recognize them throughout the year, but the next week is the national recognition for that. So by all means, if you know a 911 operator, be sure to reach out to thank them for what they do. They are the hub of public safety. As Shannon, Amy were talking, so whether it's a complex incident or a non-complex, more of a smaller response, we're involved in both of them, and actually all of them at the same time. So if there's a structure fire going on, we're also handling the medical call across town and maybe another lower priority police call across town. So we are handling and coordinating all those responses, whether they're concurrently or overlapping. So absolutely. And also we are just now launching a new technology tool for us to provide feedback to our 911 telecommunicators, and that just went live this week. So essentially that is we're putting in place a system. So on certain 911 calls, not the sensitive ones in nature, but the more non-sensitive ones, on those handful of 911 calls or non-emergency calls, the citizens will receive a quick text message feedback mechanism. So essentially, how is your experience with your 911 call? Take a rate 1 through 5. and then providing additional feedback you would like to provide to your 911 call taker. So it's really a really great way to stream some of that positive feedback that we know that's out there for our emergency communications personnel. So that, and also gives us good citizen satisfaction feedback on our center and what the service we are providing. So if y'all do, if any of the citizens that happen to call our center this coming week and they receive a feedback text, I highly encourage them to fill out that feedback and provide some positive feedback to our 911 communicators.
And that's called QHIT?
The system is QIT.
Okay.
Yes.
And I guess in the sense of that, these dispatchers, they take a lot of calls, a lot of emotional calls, life-saving calls. So I understand that the feedback will be on a monitor right in the dispatch center for them to look up, and that may be some positive reinforcement for them to see that, hey, I just satisfied a call in these people's critical time. Just talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely, and their goal is that positive reinforcement. As a 911 telecommunicators, they're handling all those non-emergency 911 phone or calls for help and assistance coming in the center. And when they get done with one, they go on to the next. So the fire and police response might still be on that previous call, but they're immediately going on to the next. So it could be a critical life-saving call followed by like a noise complaint or something less life-threatening. So, and it's really back to back to back. So, and providing this positive feedback to our personnel, and the surveys don't come out until they don't get sent out to the citizens until a few hours after. So it's not during the incident; it's after it's completed or closed out. So, but yeah, so that is very beneficial for morale and providing that positive feedback to our personnel directly from the citizens that they serve, because they generally 9 out of 10 times they don't get to know what the situation resolved was or the what was the outcome of it, because we're moving on to the next call, assistance needed. So and the police and fire department do a great job with reaching back out to the 911 communicators and following up on some of the key critical incidents for kind of what the outcome was. But majority of the outcomes, the 911 communicators don't get that feedback on a routine basis.
And this is sort of a partnership. And I know some of these dispatchers, Amy, you have to identify yourself with the badge number, but even if you didn't, they know your voice. They know these officers' voice. They know these firefighters' voice. Just talk about them being able to, work so closely with each department that they can recognize who's calling in on the radio with their voice.
It brings to mind a traffic stop years ago that I'd called in the traffic stop, given them all the information that I was supposed to give, and I didn't come back on the radio in the time that the dispatcher expected me to. So she did a status check, and I didn't hear her because the driver was being a little loud. Mm-hmm. So when I did not answer her, she immediately sent another officer my way to come back me up. And then she continued to call me. And when I did answer her, she told me she sent more units. And she told me later that there was just something in the tone of my voice that didn't sound right to her. So they learn the officers and they learn the firefighters, and they can pick up on those unspoken cues. And they do the same thing with callers. They can hear the stress in someone's voice. We hear of stories where people call 911 and order a pizza or something when they can't freely speak. Our dispatchers are able to discern somebody playing on the phone a lot of times with something's going on and we need to send somebody to check it out. So it's almost a superhuman skill that they seem to develop.
Is there a similar situation when it comes to the fire departments and
absolutely.
dispatchers?
I was just in dispatch last week, and the lady I spoke with, she was like, it's nice to put a name with a voice, or a face with a voice. And that's what I told them. Like, I feel like I know what every one of you look like just by your voice, because sometimes we don't see them very often. And just kind of the same thing like Amy said. I think that relationship, we're working together, whether we're seeing each other every day or not, we're seeing them. And one of the dispatchers even said, she said, we know what shift it is because of the voices that are on the radio. Wow. So that's pretty amazing that they have got it down to a T for that. And I'll say a little opposite, like they can read our voices, but I think we can actually read their voices as well, because we used to kind of say when they would dispatch us to a fire, we would know if it's a real fire, or if we'd know if it was maybe a false alarm because of the tones of their voices, and we knew something major was happening.
Wow. And Seth, if you can jump in on that as well, just talk about that relationship between police and fire, and knowing them by simply hearing their voice and knowing if something is wrong or something is out of the ordinary.
I'll give all the credit to our 911 telecommunicators. They do they're the heroes. They do the job day in, day out. I'm more the overarching manager oversight in recognizing the heroes that we have in the communication center. But we put a lot of emphasis on our training program and quality of service, and really providing the training and the continuing education for that. So it takes quite a long time to start as a 911 telecommunicator and go through the training program and build those skills, and the skills that come over time. So you talk to anyone that has done the job as a 911 telecommunicator, and they get through the training program, but it's still our personnel are still learning on a daily basis, and professionally developing themselves and developing those work relationships with the police and fire on the scene. And as we've talked about today, it's not just about answering that initial call; it's throughout the incident life cycle. There was a call a couple weeks ago that it was a domestic call, and the 911 telecommunicator it was a language barrier, and they actually were on the phone with a translator, and the decision made was they actually stayed on the phone with the translator and kind of conferenced that officer in there for that translation. That really de-escalated that situation. It was a 26-minute 911 call. Wow. But a kind of a great example of how it translates throughout the incident, and that's just I think the quality of people and the dedication we have working in our 911 center.
And it takes a special person,
yes,
to work that job. They have to have a servant's heart, just like police and fire. Just talk about the type of people you attract.
We attract someone that wants to serve in public safety, that wants maybe they have a tie to the community, whether it's locally or they just moved here with family, or they have some sort of service background with police, fire, former military, prior medical experience. It's very much a technology centric position now, with computers and using your computer tools. So we've had gamers apply to us. We have had former Best Buy employees. So it's definitely a mix. Recently, we're seeing a lot of interest moving to this Tennessee area, so we're getting a lot of experienced applicants or candidates wanting to come work for this, given the growth of the city and the emphasis we put on the training program. And I think recognition is a big part of it. Now as we're talking about 911 Telecommunicator Week, and a department, and for this one in the city, recognizing 911 telecommunicators as first responders and part of the public safety, whether that's through the pay plan or through recognition, or that little stuff that it does on a daily basis, that we treat them the same as we do the police and fire.
Really appreciate each one of you for joining us today. We've been discussing everything public safety, police, fire, as well as emergency communications. This public safety podcast originates from the Murfreesboro Police Department headquarters. Thank you for listening via Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music, Audible. You can also watch this public safety podcast on YouTube. The public safety podcast is produced by Michael Nevels. For more information on public safety and the fast-growing city of Murfreesboro, visit www.murfreesborotn.gov. Until next time, I'm Larry Flowers. You have a great day and enjoy the rest of your week.